Months after Mark's arrest and the partial recovery of my funds, life finally began to return to a sense of normalcy. But I knew I wasn't the same person I had been before the scam. I had rebuilt my savings, slowly and carefully, but more importantly, I had rebuilt my perspective. I started mentoring others about investment risks, red flags, and the psychology of fraud. Sharing my story became a way to turn pain into purpose. I occasionally saw news updates. Mark was sentenced to several years in prison for fraud and money laundering. I felt a mix of relief and vindication, knowing that justice had been served. Reflecting on everything, I realized the most valuable lesson wasn't about money. It was about vigilance, courage, and resilience. One bad decision can cost you everything, but taking responsibility, staying persistent, and learning from mistakes can help you recover stronger than ever. I closed my laptop one evening, thinking about the journey. The fear, the uncertainty, the sleepless nights, the adrenaline of the chase. And I smiled. I had survived, I had learned, and I had grown. Sometimes, the biggest losses teach the most important lessons, and this was mine. The end. With part of my money returned and Mark behind bars, I finally had time to reflect. The experience had changed me, not just financially but mentally and emotionally. I realized how easily desperation and hope could cloud judgment. I had trusted blindly, ignored red flags, and let greed push me toward disaster. But I also learned resilience, the ability to keep moving forward even when the odds were stacked against me. I started rebuilding carefully. Instead of chasing high-risk, get-rich-quick schemes, I focused on small, steady investments. I diversified, did thorough research, and consulted experts before every step. Slowly, my finances stabilized. Lisa stayed in touch, and together we began helping others avoid similar scams. Sharing our story, showing the red flags, and teaching careful investing became part of our healing process. The ordeal had cost me money, sleepless nights, and peace of mind, but it had also taught me invaluable lessons. Patience, vigilance, and the importance of never giving up, even when everything seems lost. And finally, for the first time in months, I felt hope, not reckless hope, but grounded, cautious, and powerful hope. With Mark in custody, I felt a cautious sense of relief. But reality hit me quickly. Catching him didn't automatically mean I would get my money back. Authorities started tracing the financial trail. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and hidden investments had scattered my savings across dozens of invisible pockets. Every transfer revealed more complexity, more deception. Then came the first shocking discovery. Some of the funds had already been moved overseas, laundered through multiple channels, and were nearly impossible to recover. My stomach sank. But not all hope was lost. One small account in a lesser-known bank had untouched funds, enough to partially cover my losses. Lisa and I worked with investigators, meticulously tracking each step. During the process, I discovered something I hadn't expected. Mark had been targeting people who trusted too easily, relying on their belief in perfect opportunities. It was personal, psychological fraud at its finest. The realization stung, but it also fueled my determination. Finally, after weeks of paperwork, phone calls, and coordination with multiple authorities, I received confirmation. A portion of my money would be returned. Not everything, but enough to rebuild and start over. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of closure. Mark had lost his freedom, some of my funds were coming back, and the nightmare that had consumed my life was slowly coming to an end. Yet, deep down, I knew the lessons from this ordeal would stay with me forever. Trust carefully, research relentlessly, and never let greed cloud judgment. The morning of the operation, tension hung in the air like thick fog. Lisa and I met the authorities at a safe location, reviewing the plan one last time. Mark's flight was scheduled to leave in under an hour. Every detail had to be perfect. We monitored him via surveillance cameras. As he approached the private airstrip, my heart raced. After months of fear and uncertainty, he was finally within reach. But then, everything went sideways. A second black SUV appeared on the road, intercepting Mark's car. 2 men stepped out, blocking the path. My stomach dropped. Who were they? Accomplices? Private security? Mark stepped out calmly, smiling, as if he had anticipated this moment. He waved at the men, then entered the aircraft. My hopes surged. He was leaving. The authorities acted immediately, rushing to intercept the plane. But a sudden delay in takeoff allowed Mark's accomplices to lock down the perimeter temporarily. It was chaos. Officers shouted into radios, engines roared, and my hands shook. In the midst of confusion, Mark turned and looked directly at me, smirking. That smirk carried months of manipulation, deceit, and arrogance. I felt a mix of fear and determination. Finally, after tense moments that felt like hours, the authorities secured the area, and Mark was detained before the plane could take off. My body trembled as relief washed over me. Months of chasing, months of fear, months of losing everything, Mark was finally caught. But the story wasn't over. There were still questions. Where had all the stolen money gone? Could I recover any of it? And what did this entire ordeal truly teach me about risk, trust, and human greed? The next morning, I contacted the authorities. I had all the evidence we had gathered: photos, timestamps, license plates, and the trail of shell companies. At first, the officer on the line was skeptical. "Are you sure this isn't just a civil dispute?" he asked. I explained everything, showing the patterns of fraudulent transfers and Mark's evasive behavior. Slowly, I could see him realizing the seriousness of the situation. We agreed to a careful plan. I couldn't confront Mark directly anymore. It was too risky. Instead, the authorities would coordinate surveillance while Lisa and I continued to monitor him discreetly. Days passed with little movement. I began doubting myself, wondering if Mark had vanished again. But one night, surveillance footage showed him leaving the cabin, driving towards a nearby private airstrip. This was our chance. We shared the footage with the authorities. They confirmed Mark had booked a private flight under a false name. He was trying to leave the state. "This is it," the officer said. "We can intercept him now if we coordinate correctly." I felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. Months of chasing, months of panic, frustration, and sleepless nights had led to this pivotal moment. It was no longer just about money. This was about justice, proving that someone who takes everything from others can be held accountable. And finally, the chase had a real direction. We spent hours combing the area where Mark's SUV had disappeared. Just when hope seemed lost, Lisa spotted a small trail of disturbed dirt leading into a cluster of trees near a hidden path. "He must have taken this route," she whispered. We followed cautiously, every step amplified by the crunch of gravel and the distant hum of engines. Finally, we reached a secluded cabin, clearly out of place in the otherwise empty woods. The windows were tinted, and the black SUV was parked in front, just as we had hoped. I felt a surge of adrenaline and fear. Here he was, Mark, the man who had ruined our lives, right in front of us. But rushing in now would be reckless. We needed evidence. I pulled out a small camera, snapping photos of his movements, jotting down license plate numbers, and recording timestamps. Every little detail mattered. Even a small slip could give him an advantage. Then, a sudden sound made me freeze, a branch snapping under someone's foot. I turned, heart racing, and saw a man watching us from behind the trees. Panic set in. Had Mark anticipated we'd follow him? We retreated carefully, hiding the evidence and retreating to a safe distance to plan our next move. Despite the fear, hope flared brighter than ever. For the first time, we had a real, tangible trail, a location, activity logs, and visual evidence that could lead authorities directly to him. But one thing was clear: Mark wasn't just a fraudster. He was dangerous, smart, and ready to fight back. And we were now deep in his world. The flight to the neighboring state felt surreal. Every minute on the plane, I ran through scenarios in my head. What if Mark knew we were coming? What if it was a trap? What if I failed again? We rented a small car and drove to the small airport from the notes. The place was nearly deserted, just a few private planes and empty hangars. My palms were sweaty as Lisa and I moved cautiously, scanning the area. Then we spotted him. Mark. Leaning against a sleek black SUV, talking on the phone. His posture relaxed, smug. He had no idea we were watching. My heart raced. After months of chasing leads, months of fear, deception, and loss, he was finally right in front of me. We debated silently. Should we confront him now? Or follow him first? Risking it all, we decided to tail him discreetly. But almost immediately, we hit our first major obstacle. As Mark drove off, he took a sudden, sharp turn down a narrow, unpaved road. Lisa's voice was tense. He's heading somewhere remote. This could be dangerous. I realized we were stepping into unknown territory, literally and figuratively. The further we followed, the higher the stakes. Every mile felt like a test of nerves, and one wrong move could blow the entire chance of catching him. Then, just as we turned a bend, his SUV vanished. Dirt kicked up, tires screeched. My stomach dropped. Had we lost him? In that moment, I understood, finding Mark wasn't going to be easy. He was cunning, resourceful, and always one step ahead. But I wasn't about to give up. Not now. After the encounter at the consultancy, I knew I had to be even more cautious. Mark was playing a dangerous game, and one wrong move could cost me more than just money. A week later, a breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Lisa, the fellow investor I had met earlier, reached out. I found something, she said, voice tense over the phone. I tracked one of his shell companies to a storage facility outside the city. There's something there. I can't explain it fully, but it might be the key to tracking him. I felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. Storage facilities often meant secrecy. What could be inside? Documents? Evidence of his scams? Or traps? We drove there together, hearts pounding. The facility was nondescript, rows of identical storage units, cameras overhead, and a keypad entry system. I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to be simple. Lisa entered the access code, and the door clicked open. Inside, piles of boxes were stacked high. Paperwork, envelopes, and files marked with Mark's pseudonyms. I quickly scanned the first boxes: bank statements, transfer records, personal addresses, phone numbers. My pulse quickened. This was it, the trail. And buried within the chaos, a small folder caught my eye. It contained handwritten notes, meeting schedules, and even flight tickets. One name repeated itself: a small airport in a neighboring state. This might be where he's hiding, I whispered, my hands trembling. Lisa nodded. If we follow this, we might finally catch him. But we have to be careful, he's dangerous. For the first time since losing everything, I felt a flicker of control. There was a path forward, a real, tangible lead. And I knew the next step could either bring justice or disaster. After the cafe encounter, I knew I had to be smarter. I couldn't just confront Mark again. He was unpredictable and dangerous. I started collecting every piece of information I could find: surveillance footage from the area, online transactions linked to his shell companies, and witness statements from neighbors and past investors. One night, while reviewing bank records on my laptop at home, I noticed a pattern. Several transfers had gone through a tiny financial consultancy that I had never heard of. Curiosity burned, and I decided to visit the office the next morning. As I approached, the hairs on my neck stood up. A black SUV rolled slowly past, circling the block. My heart raced. Was it him? Inside the building, I tried to appear casual, asking receptionists-like questions. No one seemed to know anything. But as I turned to leave, I felt a sharp presence behind me. A man whispered, "Looking for someone dangerous, huh?" I froze. My mind raced. He was tall, muscular, and his tone wasn't joking. Before I could react, he continued, "Be careful who you follow. Curiosity can cost you more than money. I stumbled out of the building, adrenaline surging. My laptop, my notes, my entire plan suddenly felt fragile. I realized that chasing Mark wasn't just risky, it was dangerous. That night, I barely slept, running scenarios in my head. But giving up wasn't an option. I had lost everything already, and now it wasn't just about money, it was about survival, justice, and proving that I wouldn't be intimidated. The game had escalated. Mark was aware of me, and every move I made now carried a real threat. A week later, I decided I had enough of indirect clues. I had to see him, confront him. I staked out the office space I had tracked down. For hours, I sat in my car, watching the black SUV pull in and out, noting the patterns of arrivals and departures. Then, around 4 p.m., Mark appeared. His sharp suit was perfectly pressed, his confidence radiating as he walked into the building. My heart pounded. I knew approaching him directly could be dangerous, but anger and desperation overpowered caution. I followed him discreetly, keeping distance. At one point, he stopped at a coffee shop. I entered, pretending to be a customer, and watched him sit in the corner, laptop open, phone ringing non-stop. He looked exactly like the charming predator I had imagined, but in person, he was intimidating. Summoning all my courage, I approached the table. "Mark?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up, smirked, and gestured to the chair across from him. Well. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said casually, as if we were meeting for coffee, not because I had just lost everything. I felt a mixture of fear and rage. "You took everything from me. My savings, my future. I want it back." Mark leaned back, smiling, almost amused. "You invested. That's the risk. Life isn't fair. But tell me, how far would you go to get it back?" That question sent a chill down my spine. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It was a game, and he was a master player. I left the cafe that day shaken. I didn't have my money back, but I had confirmation. He was real, nearby, and aware of me. And the chase had only just begun. The next morning, I started tracking Mark's financial footprint. I knew it wouldn't be easy. He was careful, leaving fake names, shell companies, and offshore accounts. But I wasn't about to give up. I started with small details, email headers, IP addresses, phone numbers tied to different accounts. Hours turned into days as I cross-checked information, and slowly, a faint trail emerged. One of his shell companies had made a suspicious transfer to a bank in a nearby state. Excited, I called the bank, only to hit a wall. "We can't disclose client information," the teller said firmly. Frustration set in, but I remembered something the accountant had said. "Follow the patterns. Watch the connections. People like him leave breadcrumbs, even when they think they're invisible." I dug deeper. Public records revealed a recently leased office space under a pseudonym. It wasn't much, but it was something concrete. The breakthrough came when a neighbor mentioned seeing a black SUV frequently parked outside, with a man who matched Mark's description entering and leaving at odd hours. My heart raced. This was the first real confirmation that he was still operating nearby. I realized that catching him wouldn't be simple. He was always one step ahead, hiding behind false identities and fake documents. Every lead I found seemed to be booby-trapped with dead ends. And yet, every obstacle only fueled my determination. I wasn't just chasing money anymore. I was chasing closure, justice, and the lesson that sometimes, risk can cost you everything. I decided I couldn't wait for authorities to catch up. If I wanted answers, I had to act myself. I started piecing together everything I knew about Mark, the events he attended, the companies he had listed on fake documents, the emails he sent, even the way he phrased his promises. Patterns began to emerge. Late one night, I found a small online forum where investors were anonymously discussing Mark's schemes. People shared screenshots of contracts, emails, and even a blurry photo of him walking out of a downtown office with a briefcase. One message caught my eye. "If you follow the trail through his shell companies, you might find a lead," but it's risky. I felt a thrill. This was my first real lead. The next day, I tracked down an accountant who had worked with one of Mark's shell companies. At first, she refused to talk. But when I mentioned that law enforcement was aware of the fraud, she hesitated. Look, I shouldn't say anything, but he's not just running scams locally. He has a network of accounts across multiple states. If you really want to get your money back, you'll need proof, strategy, and maybe some luck. That evening, I returned home, feeling both empowered and terrified. I had a plan forming, but it was dangerous. Every step could alert him. Every wrong move could make me a target. And yet, despite the fear, I couldn't ignore the burning need to get my money back. I realized then, this wasn't just about recovering funds. It was about pride, justice, and proving to myself that I could face the storm. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing. Every scenario played out in my head: creditors, eviction notices, humiliation. I had trusted Mark with my life savings, and now it felt like I was standing in the middle of a storm with no umbrella. The next morning, I started digging. I called banks, financial advisors, and even tried to track Mark's company online. But every trail led to dead ends. The company was registered under a shell corporation. Phone numbers disconnected. Addresses fake. Desperation made me do something reckless. I went back to the networking venue where I had met him, hoping someone there might know something. There, I ran into Lisa, another investor who had attended the same event. Her face was pale. You too? She whispered. I lost everything. We shared stories. It became clear that Mark wasn't just slick, he was a master of deception. He had convinced dozens of people to hand over money with promises of unreal returns. And now, he had disappeared. But Lisa had a clue. I saw him a week ago, leaving the city in a black SUV. He's not just gone, he's running. I felt a mix of fear and rage. Fear for what had been stolen, rage at myself for falling for it. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a spark lit up. I need to fight back. I need to get my money, or at least justice. I didn't know how yet. But this was no longer just about an investment. This was personal. The first 2 weeks felt like a dream. I checked my account multiple times a day. Every time the number went up, a rush of adrenaline hit me. I started imagining what I'd do with the profits, pay off debts, maybe even buy a small apartment. Then the first strange email arrived. Your account is under review. Please verify your recent transfers immediately. At first, I shrugged it off. Mistakes happen, I thought. But the emails kept coming, each one more urgent than the last. Some were from the company, some supposedly from Mark himself, insisting I send more information, passwords, or even transfer additional funds to unlock higher profits. I started feeling a knot in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I tried calling Mark. His phone went straight to voicemail. Then his assistant supposedly emailed me back, claiming he was traveling abroad. Red flags were everywhere, but my greed and hope made me rationalize everything. And then, one Friday evening, the balance that had been steadily growing vanished. Completely. Zero. Gone. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my hands trembling. My savings. Every penny. All gone. I tried to reach Mark again. No answer. Social media profiles deleted. The company's website disappeared overnight. Panic set in. I realized that this wasn't just a bad investment, it was a complete disaster. And the worst part? I had no idea how I would recover. I'll never forget the day it all started. It seemed like a golden opportunity at first. I had been saving for years, carefully budgeting every penny, and then this guy, Mark, approached me at a networking event. Sharp suit, charming smile, and an air of confidence that made you trust him immediately. I've got an investment opportunity that can triple your money in months, he said, leaning in over the table. I hesitated. I knew better than to trust strangers with my savings. But his pitch was flawless, filled with charts, projections, and testimonials that sounded real. "Just a small amount to start. You don't want to miss this," he added. I should have walked away. I should have. But the promise of financial freedom, the excitement of finally making my money work for me, clouded my judgment. That night, I transferred half of my savings into the account he gave me. A chill ran down my spine, but I convinced myself. This is the moment everything changes. The first week, everything looked perfect. My account balance seemed to grow daily. I checked it obsessively, feeling a rush of pride and excitement I hadn't felt in years. But deep down, a small voice whispered, "Something's not right. Why does it feel too easy?" Little did I know, that whisper was the first warning of a storm that would soon consume everything I had worked for.